Now bring Ambassador Martin Kimani, Director of the National Counterterrorism Center and also Special Envoy for Countering Violent Extremism. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us on the broadcast tonight. What can you tell Kenyans about the status of the fight against extremism in light of this latest loss for Kenyans and what's happening in the county of Lamu?
Well, thank you for inviting me this evening. It's a very sad evening for those of us who are in the security services and who worked with PSL Maui in government. I met her when I was ambassador to UN Habitat, and we were dealing with housing issues in those days. And I found her to be a consummate professional, someone who had a very gentle spirit and a real dedication for her job. And the next time I spoke to her, I was in my present role, and we were actually speaking about how we could work together to engage young people in Lamu and along the coast to turn away from the lure of violent extremism. So we're tremendously sad, and I think we send all our condolences to her family and to her friends.
Would you say that the insurgency in Lamu since the early months of this year is a bit of a sore thumb in the fight against extremism?
Well, first, I wouldn't characterize the violence in Lamu as an insurgency. Rather, I'd characterize it as a terrorist campaign that's targeting the civilians in Lamu County and in other parts of Kenya. And there's an important difference between the two. By terrorist, I mean an organization and a group of people whose claims and demands cannot be met by the Republic of Kenya or by the Kenyan people. So their violence is really, I don't want to call it meaningless, but to us in Kenya, it does not have a place in our political life and in our social life. Now, having said that, the violence that ended up costing PSL Maui her life and other government officials, especially security officers, is something that we're continuing to contend with, and it continues to be a challenge. We have an Operation Linda Boni, whose aim is to flush out the terrorists from hiding within Boni Forest. We have worked very hard to limit their movements, but they have continued to trickle into Lamu and have perpetrated attacks on civilians. Notably, they've attacked schools, they've attacked medical centers, and even while saying that they are fighting for the Muslim people, they have victimized Kenyan Muslims tremendously. And I think the shooting and attack on PSL Maui, a very pious Muslim and a good person, is an illustration of just how far and how deranged they are in their aims.
All right, and the Kenya Defense Forces are still active, part of the African mission in Somalia, AMISOM. And a question that has been asked a lot of times for the last 3 or 4 years or so, what is the endgame in Somalia?
The endgame is essentially to make sure that Al-Shabaab is unable to operate as a cohesive force that can harm Kenyan citizens or the security of Kenya. When Kenya went into Somalia in 2011, it was both to defend the country and also to make sure that the Al-Shabaab threat did not get any worse. There have been some comments, especially in the political space, that we should not be in Somalia. Of course, everyone has the right to their opinion. But the fact of the matter is, we had to go into Somalia. And I believe, hadn't we done so, Al-Shabaab today would be a more powerful force able to hurt Kenya even more. And their ideology demands that they attack Kenya, not because we've done anything wrong to them, but because we exist as a democracy, we exist as an open society, we exist as a country that makes its own laws and does not follow their ideological leanings. So they were always going to attack us. And so thank God that we went in, and that has had its costs, especially to our soldiers. But we shall continue being in Somalia up until the day Kenya's security is assured. And we have committed not only to the Somali people and the Somali government and to the African Union, but to the global community, that we're all going to work together until we withdraw based on the conditions on the ground.
All right, many thanks, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador Martin Kimani, Director of the National Counterterrorism Center and Special Envoy for Countering Violent Extremism. This conversation will continue at 10 p.m. on Bottom Line Africa with Yusuf Ibrahim. You do not want to miss that.